Hello, everyone. Tom Tabor here with Jonathan Russian. And this is our first episode of our new podcast, Guys Being Dudes.
Yeah, we're excited to start this podcast. We're going to be talking a lot about, specifically this first episode, we're going to be talking about the recruiting process and how to go from, kind of being that beginner, at the high school level to really taking those steps and becoming a serious athlete.
Yep. And then the goal of this podcast, it's going to be super random. Obviously, each episode will have a main focus, but the goal is to be as random as possible. We're thinking everything football, maybe even, I don't know, other diving in that, other athletics, strength conditioning,
Whatever we have to cover, we're going to be utilizing Tom's experience and kind of piggybacking off of that.
Yep. And then the name Guys Being Dudes, we thought it was fitting. So basically, where this stems from is way back in the day, I was being recruited by Boston College, and the head coach there, Steve Adazio, he would always say, "Hey, be a dude." And then like whenever he was out on the practice field, and the recruits, whenever we were watching, he'd always be like, "Look at that! What's better than that?" And he'd just point out to the field. He'd be like, "Guys being dudes." And then all of a sudden, there was this very famous video went viral, and it's like one of our favorite videos, and it's just Steve Adazio just saying, "What's better than this? Guys being dudes." So then, the reason we kind of brought this back was because Jonathan and I, we work out together, and every time we're running hills, we'll be struggling, and then I'll be like, "Hey, Jonathan, what's better than this? Guys being dudes." All right, so episode 1, our main focus here is, high school football players. They get that, they have that dream. They want to play college football. They want to play at the next level. What's the process? How do they get there?
Right. And so, with us talking, obviously planning our podcast, we kind of came up with the idea of the spark, right? Because, when we were kind of talking through that process, you said that the spark per se is kind of what made you start to take your recruiting process more seriously. So that's kind of what we want to go over with our first episode. And I know that spark for you happened at the NCSS recruiting.
Yep, NCSA.
NCSA.
So yeah, like I said, we thought the perfect name for this episode is the spark, because it does all start with the spark. So as Jonathan was referring to, for me, it was this meeting we had with all the athletes when I was in high school. They had a night where they brought in Stalin Colonnade, who played defensive tackle in the NFL for a number of years. I think he was an 8-year pro. I could be mistaken. He played for the Vikings and the Jags, played his college ball at BC. Huge guy. Gosh, he must have been at least 6'8", man. He was just huge. But yeah, so they brought in Stalin Colonnade. He was working for NCSA, basically a recruiting agency. And kind of before we had this presentation, I didn't really understand what the process would be like to get recruited. I didn't even think
So before that presentation, were you even thinking you could be a D1 athlete, a D1 college football player?
No, because I thought how do you do that? How do you get noticed? How do you do things who films me? How do I get my film out? What do I even do? And then what was so awesome about this presentation, Stalin Colonnade was obviously promoting his service here. But he basically he put out in front of us the roadmap. This is how I get recruited. It's kind of this is a step-by-step process. This is what you do. This is how you get there. And this is how my service can help you get there. And it's like, oh damn, you are a good salesman. Because but no, just the fact that he kind of laid out that roadmap. It's like, hey, this is possible. So I was a 15-year-old. I was heavier, but I had these scrawny little arms. Probably freaking no shades of athleticism whatsoever. And then there I was after this presentation. I'm like, I'm gonna play Division I football.
There we go. So yeah, so once you kind of went through that process, you you got the blueprint, you heard someone talk that actually had been through that process. Where did it kind of go from there? Like, did you just start taking? Is that when you started going to camps outside of football, or was there anything in between that process?
So it kind of all started with, there had to be, some sort of commitment, because obviously, a lot of people say like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this thing, and then they won't expect to really have to put in work. For me, it was a big moment with my dad. Because we were talking about this service, NCSA, like, should we do it? Because I mean, obviously, it was a pretty expensive service, but like, it would be worth the investment, obviously, if you ultimately make it. So basically, it was a big conversation with my dad. He's like, "Hey, I'll do this for you, but I need to know that you're all in. I need to know that you're going to make this commitment." And honestly, the first step for me was probably to get physically ready because I didn't have any training regimen, like by the time I got to high school. So yeah, like second half of my freshman year was when my dad was like, "Hey, I'm signing us up for this gym. It's going to be me and you, and we're going to train every freaking day. We need to get your body right. We need you to be ready for this."
That's crazy because, just how you're describing it, it's kind of like that probably was the first time in your life where you had to like bet on yourself. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? You had to bet on yourself and really kind of ramp things up to that next gear.
Yeah. And I didn't really have the resume for it. Let's be honest. I mean, yeah, when I was a freshman, I was playing football 8th grade freshman year. Like, dude, I would die during conditioning. Like, whenever we ran gassers, like I would always be like one of the last guys. I was one of the slowest people out there. Like, it was freaking embarrassing. And then, there were some kids. Well, actually, freshman year was very humbling. If you're going against guys in varsity, which you do, you're basically like a dummy in practice, a tackling dummy. Like, it's like these guys are lifting weights. These guys are kicking my ass. Like, what the hell?
Right. So you said after, that program, your dad signs you up for a gym. You have
Mhm.
first time ever, you're betting on yourself, you have to get serious. And you went through that at a pretty young age, which is kind of crazy because some people don't get to that point until, adulthood where they have to start making those tough decisions like per se, like if you want to change a career or something like that, or transfer to a different college or change your major. Like some people they make that decision later on. But you made it pretty early on, which is pretty significant.
At a pretty
But
early age. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
so yeah, that's an awesome that's awesome perspective because there's gonna be players like you where at that early age they have to make that decision and they have to be serious like that.
Mhm.
Um, so
Absolutely. Because I mean, so ultimately, at that point in time, it's like okay, my freshman year is wasted. Obviously, I'm not playing varsity. It's like okay, my first goal, and it has to be a realistic goal. You're not just going to go play. You're not going to make it to Division 1 in one day. So it's like okay, what are the first steps here? Getting physically ready, but then shit, man, like I have to be a starter for my varsity team. I'm thinking like, okay, by the start of sophomore year, I need to start. So it's like, how do I get there? So obviously, it starts with, training and, the discipline that comes with it. Luckily,
so how did your training regimen kind of ramp up, right? Because now you have a different goal, you have a different road, you have a different path that you're on.
Mhm.
So how did the physical training change from before NCSA and after?
Oh, before there was essentially nothing. Like I would maybe like run every like once or twice a week, and it would be half-ass. I'd be dogging it. My dad would look at me like be like, "Oh, you're fucking kidding me. Like you're slowing me down again," because I would try to run with my dad. And so it was just rough. But no, like my dad. I mean, my dad. He told me like, "Hey, this is gonna be hard. I'm gonna work your ass. All right. This is gonna be difficult. But you will develop the discipline. You will develop, kind of the physical.
So at first it just started out as you training literally with your dad
Yep,
every day.
every day. So we'd pretty much lift 6 days a week, and then we would combine lifting with conditioning. So sometimes you would do like a couple workouts during a day, and and then that the discipline for my dad was kind of instilled. So my dad, he was in the army. He went to the Virginia Military Institute. So like I mean, his whole college experience was the military. I mean, at VMI, I mean, the amount of PT you have to do, the amount of just the amount of discipline you get from just going to that kind of school for 4 years. And then, of course, he did 8 years in the Army after that. So that kind of carried over to.
So that kind of goes back to, like you said, the roadmap, right? Because you got the roadmap from, Stalin Kalanick
Mhm.
as far as the recruiting process, but then you also had the roadmap after that from your dad,
Yes,
from his time, in the military, and his
absolutely.
training regimen, the discipline. He had already kind of figured that kind of stuff out, and he was able to pass that along to you and help you go towards your goals. So from freshman to sophomore year, um, obviously you're training more with your dad. Your physical regimen is increased. Is that the time where you did your first development camp, or was that later?
Yes, yes. So getting into the development camps, as a young athlete, development camps are huge. So I did my first development camp in June before my sophomore year. Did this at the College of the Holy Cross, which was essentially right down the street from me in Worcester, Massachusetts. But these development camps are awesome, and I think they're essential. I think all young athletes should attend these. So they'll typically bring in just a plethora of coaches from different colleges. So at this one in particular, Holy Cross. So Holy Cross would be the only Division I coaches there because it's like, hey, we're not going to bring any other coaches from our level here, obviously. But they'll bring in a ton of D3, D2 coaches, NAIA, guys from JUCOs, community colleges, stuff like that. And then basically, at these camps, you pretty much find out, early on, hey, these guys are college coaches. I guess the biggest question, is, can I handle, the kind of coaching that I'm going to get at the next level? And each coach is different, of course. You're going to be, kind of thrown into different coaching styles.
So have those coaches worked with each other before, or is it just it kind of sounds like both a camp for the athletes and a camp for the coaches, right? Because
Oh,
the coaches are coming together. They're probably trying to compete a little bit. I mean, when you get
it's a good networking opportunity for
right,
coaches because I mean, obviously, every coach is they're always looking for what's the next
step
opportunity, what's a better opportunity So it's a great networking thing for them. And then I mean, coaches. The awesome thing about coaching is there's no one way to coach. These coaches can learn from each other. Even the coaches obviously at Holy Cross, much higher level than let's say Worcester State. But hey, maybe the Holy Cross coach, he's seeing something from the Worcester State guy. He's like, oh wow,
I'm gonna take that.
I can implement that at my practice. Right. So it's not just for the players; it is also for the coaches
as well.
But this is where you kind of develop the just the fundamentals to play football. A lot of these development camps, I mean, it's pretty basic. Is just getting your stance and start. How much weight do I need to distribute in my feet? When should I be shooting my hands? Stuff like that.
So lots of technique.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it kind of sounds like you get your first real taste of pressure too, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're at these camps, you're obviously, you're going to need to perform for these coaches.
Absolutely.
Because if you're going to go on to become a college athlete, you're going to have to perform for those coaches, right? So.
Yep. No, they pressure's on early, and of course, you got. I mean, you have so many people at these camps from so many other schools that you would never even play in high school. Because in high school, you got to think about it your division, your level is so small, you'll only play a handful of schools. Well, it's but you could be playing kids, going against kids at these camps from different states and stuff like that, or just powerhouses.
So you're exposed to a different level of talent,
different level of competition, absolutely, than what you would face, on your own high school team or in your own league. So that kind of helps too. It's hey, I can kind of size myself up against the rest of the competition. Where do I stand? What are these coaches looking for? What do they like from what they're seeing from this kid at this school?
And did you have an instance that you can remember from any of these development camps where you saw a kid and you were like, I need to get to a level like that? Or were you always the standout? I mean,
of course I would like to say stand out. No, trying to remember. I think it was my first.
I mean, I feel like there had to have been one where you're like, because that's going to keep you motivated as well, right?
Yeah.
You show up to this development camp and these coaches are like, yeah, this guy, I like this kid right here.
I mean, I will say at like probably not in the development camps, but at prospect camps much later on, there were definitely guys that absolutely humbled me. Particularly at like at my BC prospect camp, which ended up we'll get to that much later in our podcast, but that was just a complete nightmare for me. There was this one defensive end that just he was on me all day long, and just I was humbled by him. I was like, I need to get to that
Right, right. All right, so after your development camp, you're heading into your sophomore season,
level.
right? So this is around the time where, so obviously your mindset has shifted, your talent has probably shifted based on the work you're putting in. What's your did your mind change at all? Like did you go into sophomore year like, yeah, I'm ready to start varsity, or were you still like, I gotta work my ass off to make sure I'm starting varsity so I can keep going on this journey?
Oh no, there was definitely a huge sense of confidence, especially after those development camps, because the awesome thing about those camps is you translate those skills that you learn in those camps. You know, that kind of coaching, you take that and you implement it into your high school team. And yeah, my confidence was off the charts, even though, I hadn't started. And it's funny because it's like, guys in my high school, they're like, all right, Tom Tabor, like I know he's been like working out more. I know he's done these camps, but it's still Tom Tabor. He's not going to be that good. But I freaking knew like after these camps, like, dude, I could do this. I could do this. I knew like day one of preseason camp in high school, I knew I was ready to take that starting position. I made sure to relay that to my coaches, like, hey, I'm ready for this. Like, just let me have at it.
So just that painting that full circle picture when we talk about the spark, like you basically saw results in a year. Right?
Yeah.
Just from that one recruiting event, Stalin Colonnade, development camp, ramping up your training with your dad. Now all of a sudden you go from like, I was conditioning twice a week trying to keep up with my dad, not really knowing how we get there.
Going back to that, I'll tell you something else my dad did for me. He ended up buying this sled for my birthday, and so it's a sled. You put weights on it. You have a little harness so that you pull it. And my dad was basically like, "Hey, so we're still going to be lifting every day, but I want you to hit this sled every single day." And he's like, "I got the perfect spot for you to use this." So we lived on a hill. So it was a pretty steep hill too.
I know where the hill comes from. Your love of hills.
So my dad was like, "Hey, take this sled out to the yard, start at the bottom, put the weights on, sprint all the way up, and then I don't know, maybe do that like 10 times or so. Do that every single day." And oh my God, that sled was like the bane of my existence. Like it killed me every single day. Like it would put me on the ground. Like after my last rep, I'd be on the ground for like 20 minutes just trying to catch my breath. And I mean, something that always kept me going was my dad would always say, and this is something I would even say to my workouts today. My dad, this is something he had from VMI, was they would always tell him, never say die. Because that's even in their fight song, like, hey, never say die. That's the spirit of VMI or something like that. So, going through these hills with weight on my back, on the sled, I'm just gassed, so doggone tired, but I'm like, never say die.
That sled kind of helped teach you, the mindset that you needed.
Yep. Taught me how to be resilient.
That's to just endure. Like there is no quitting.
Yep.
Basically.
It's like, I have to, it's so true when they say, no pain, no gain, because gosh, to really develop your body, to get your body ready for something like this, like you're going to be in a world of hurt.
Yep. Body and mind.
Yes.
Body and mind, because that's very much mental. Very much mental.
Our strength coaches would always say 90% mental, 10% physical.
Yes, sir. But yeah, going back to, that first year, you had that loose idea, that loose concept, how do I get on this journey? And then that spark happens, right? So now going into sophomore year, your confidence is completely changed. you're walking in there like, yeah, I want to start. You're talking to your coaches, I want to start. You're bringing in that next level of technique, that higher level of play to your high school program,
Mhm.
um, which I think is something that a lot of high school kids can follow that path and really get on that track as early as possible, so they can
Absolutely.
see that development year over year as early as they possibly can. Because, like you said, you really want to ideally start varsity your sophomore year, correct?
I mean, if you can even do it your freshman year, that would be amazing. But yeah, if you can start as early as possible, I mean, that's going to be crucial, because one of the most important things about being recruited is the film. You know, the eye, the eye in the sky doesn't lie, right?
The eye in the
What's
sky doesn't
on
lie.
film is who you are. And I mean, the more film you have, the better. I mean, there's a lot of people like, I mean, you're definitely at a disadvantage, if you're not starting until your junior or your senior year. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I mean, you're definitely at a disadvantage because you're not going to have as much tape that you need to put out there. And the awesome thing about starting at an early age is coaches can kind of see year over year like what kind of changes you've put on the field as a player. Like how has your technique improved? Like how has your effort improved? Like are you finishing plays? Do you look tired? Are you taking the right steps? Do you look stronger out there? Like do you look like you're now that you've developed so much that you're one of the more dominant players in your league?
Right, absolutely. So so when you're developing your body and your play, how do you kind of know whether or not you can play at that next level? Like, are you looking at, you know, are you looking at one player that's playing at that level and trying to see like how you stack up against them?
Mhm.
How do you kind of, in a realistic way, paint that picture in your mind that, yeah, I can play Division One
Yeah,
college
absolutely. I would always size up to the competition. So even as a freshman, I'm going through. So my goal is I want to play Division 1 football. I don't care if it's at the FBS level. I don't care if it's at the FCS level. I just want to play Division 1 football. So what I would do is, I would pretty much go through
football?
as many rosters as I can. I look at like, and I was an O lineman, so it's like, hey, I'm looking at your height, I'm looking at your weight, and then I'm looking at like all these other key measurables. I'm trying to see, hey, where do I need to be? So now if we go back to like freshman year, I'm like what, like 6'2", like 225 pounds.
Freshman year?
Freshman year. So I see that these linemen at the Division 1 level, it's like, okay, so let's say FCS, you're seeing guys that are more like, okay, like 6'2", 6'3". I ended up being 6'3" and a quarter. So it's like at that height, it's like, okay, so with that kind of height, it's like I'm mostly looking at FCS level. So when you get to FBS, it's like people are kind of like, 6'4", 6'5"
Now, are
on
there
average.
coaches telling you that? Like, did a coach say, yeah, based on your size, your speed,
Mhm.
you look like an FCS football player?
So it's funny when I was being recruited, there are a lot of coaches that did tell me I was too short because I remember one school in particular, Colgate. It's like, hey, so we're looking for offensive tackles right now. Unfortunately, you're only 6'3", so you're too short.
You're only
Um,
6'3".
exactly, because I mean,
Too
at,
short.
at my height, I mean, I was the build for an interior lineman. I was not built like a tackle whatsoever. But yeah, so typically at the FCS, 6'2", 6'3", you're good. FBS, let's say like 6'4", 6'5". Even at 6'3", I was able to play in the FBS. But I mean, it's for people to get scholarships at that height for offensive line, it's kind of like,
So with there being, because that seems like it's really important to kind of know based on like where your measurables are going to shake out, what position is going to be ideal for you.
mhm,
Can you talk about, for other players where maybe they don't have the size right away like you did?
mhm.
Maybe they get their height and speed later. How do they kind of navigate figuring out later on in their career what position would be best for them? And does that happen?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, you see people even change their positions in college, so it's like really never too late. Because I mean, by the time you get to college, like you might not even be fully developed yet. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so like really, I mean, I set my goal early on. It's like I knew I'm going to be an offensive lineman, so I know like for body weight, I mean, I need to at least get up to like 290, 295. But hey, Rome wasn't built in a day, so you got to realize it takes time. So I kind of set that goal. Like coaches need to see, kind of the year over year growth. So it's like, okay, sophomore year, I'm going into my season at 230. And then by junior year, it's like, okay, I need to at least get up to like 255, 260. And then senior year, if I can get in the 280s, I'll be good. Because then they'll realize like, hey, we can put more weight on this kid when he gets here. It's like, hey, he's already 285, 290. It's like we can easily get him up to 300, which is ultimately what they did with me my first year at UConn. They got me up to 300 pounds. But it's not going to take a day. It takes time. You have to kind of like build that roadmap for like where your body needs to be, like like where how much you need to weigh, and then for other guys that are still trying to figure out their position, it's like they need to figure out like hey, how fast do I need to be? And it's like, okay, I need to train my speed. I need to somehow get my 40 down to this. I need to get my 5-10-5 shuttle down to this, or I need to get my L drill down to this.
Gotcha. So I liked how you said Rome wasn't built in one day. It kind of, I think that's kind of alluding to the mental aspect of it. You know what I mean? Like you kind of really have to stay focused on that long-term goal because there's going to be ups and downs and things of that nature. So how do you kind of deal with that? Is it, I know you had your dad with you
Yes.
along the way. So like if someone doesn't have that, you had the luxury of having kind of like a mentor and a coach in your own house,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if there's athletes out there that don't have that, where do they kind of get that support that they need to take their game to the next level and go through those challenges? Because maybe they don't have the size sophomore year to start varsity, but then if they can have the right coach around them to see their potential, maybe junior year they can really kind of get into that groove and start putting out good film.
It is absolutely important, for you to have someone that is kind of driving you to that goal. Oftentimes it'll be a parent. For me, it was definitely my dad. My dad was essentially, my coach for this process. If it's not a parent, maybe it's your high school coach. And then also for us, we didn't know what we were getting into. It was something like let's say you don't have the support from your parents, you don't have the support from your coach. I think the first you got to find a friend that will support you, or maybe you just go to a different school because you can transfer to a different school, meet a coach that's going to get you there. So really, so your coach is.
Could you perhaps meet a coach like that at a development camp?
Absolutely. You most certainly can. And then, I mean, they a lot of coaches at those development camps, like they will continue to help you develop even when the camp's over. It's like, they'll give you their contact information. Exactly. And then, but yeah, like having the support from from a coach or a family member is crucial. You have to make sure that, especially like your coaches, you have to make sure that they're aligned, with your goals. Like I made it pretty crystal clear to my high school coaches, like, hey guys,
I'm starting next year.
First of all, I'm starting next year. All right.
Let's get that out the way.
Yeah, let's get that out the way. No competition. All right. I'm going to be your starting guard and your starting, interior defensive tackle. All right. End of story. No. It did not go down that way. No, not at all. But no, I made it crystal clear. Like, hey, these are my goals. Like, I want to play college football. I actually want to play at the Division I level. Just want to make sure you understand that. Make sure you're aligned. Obviously, I need all hands on deck here. I need as much help as possible. Obviously my dad and I, my dad's really helping, kind of pilot this process, but I need help from you guys. And then
so
if you don't even have like those right resources, honestly, for us, it was a recruiting agency that helped the NCSA. Because I will say, like, I love my high school coaches to death. Those guys are awesome. They were some of the best coaches I've ever had in my life. They taught me, just so many life lessons that I even carry to this day. I am extremely grateful for them. I will say one thing is just as far as like the process of you know getting recruited, we definitely need a little more guidance there, which is why we had this recruiting agency like NCSA. They built the roadmap, of course. Having those. Um, so NCSA, they would assign you a coach basically. So we'd have weekly phone calls with this coach, and he would kind of tell you like he would give you like a step by step process, like, hey, you should go to this development camp, or hey, you should go to this combine, or hey, these are the kind of workouts I did when I was younger and I was trying to get recruited. I mean that definitely helps a lot.
Absolutely. So, were there any players on your team that kind of clung to you and kind of followed what you were doing when they noticed your success? Or is that something that a player could do if, say, they don't, like you said, they don't have that coach that really sees them and is guiding them on that path, or they don't have their dad
Yeah,
who's training them like your dad was training you? Can you cling to another player that does have that and kind
absolutely.
of use them to take you to that next space until you're able to do it on your own?
You absolutely can do that without a doubt. I would say probably by the time I was a junior or senior, that's when I really started to get a lot more respect for my teammates. And then I had people that wanted to, kind of go under my wing, that wanted to train with me, and it was awesome. Like I felt like I was finally a leader, and I kind of, I told them like, hey, this is what I've been doing since I was your age. So like a freshman or something like that. This is what I've been doing since I was your age. This is what helped me get here. I'm going to take you with me. I'm going to have you train with me. I'm going to tell you what you should do. I mean, it definitely helps. I mean, being able to, find that one teammate, who has like just who sets the bar really high. You know that this guy wants to shoot for the stars. Why not follow them?
All right, we're back at it. So yeah, Tom, we were kind of talking about how, the body preparation and all you have to, the physical aspect of, once you're on that recruiting process and you're going from not starting to starting, you're ramping up your workouts and all those things. But I want to kind of talk about the mental aspect of it too, right?
It's a big
Because
part of it.
like you
Absolutely.
said, you've had coaches that say it's 90% mental,
Mhm.
right? So especially, being in high school, being at that younger age, um, how do you kind of deal with, because you're still developing at that point in time,
Yep.
right? How do you kind of deal with having, slips and focuses, like where you're in your process, you're doing your workouts, you're pulling that sled up the hill, but that day you just don't have it because you're a 16-year-old kid. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Exactly.
And how do you find the right mentor to challenge you in a right way so that you know, maybe you don't get burnt out,
Mhm.
right? Because you don't want to get burnt out. You don't, if you're a parent and you have an athlete that you're molding, like your dad was molding you, how do they manage to not, burn their kids out while they're
Yeah.
trying to teach them to take their um, sport to the next level? So, is there any way that you can kind of speak to those points or?
Well, so the big thing is you have to realize it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be bad days. Even when you're older, even when you're in college, during a workout, you're not always going to have it. We all have those days. Everyone does. You just you have to minimize and move on. That's the biggest advice I can give is like, just you got to bury it away. It's like, hey, that's in the past. You got to treat each day as a new day. And then, yeah, I mean, as a parent, it is important to understand like your kid is not going to be at their best every single day. You have to like 100% have to have their back. Like if they're having a bad day, and
Because they're still developing, right?
exactly, you gotta understand like, hey, this is a rough day. I gotta show support here. I gotta understand that I can't, like if my dad sees me struggling during a workout, like I'm just dying, like I just don't have it
Like,
today.
what's that balance, right? Because obviously, if your dad believes in you, like he probably did,
He
he's gonna
believed in me more than I believed in myself.
right.
So obviously they're
He's
gonna
he's
push you harder than you think you can be pushed.
he's gonna push you, and he's gonna know kind of how to motivate you. But is there a balance in that situation of like, can he keep pushing you all the time to
Yes.
get you to that next level? And that might be just you specifically. Is there a balance of that when you have that goal in mind? You know what I mean? Is there a way that you can motivate someone when they're not really at their best that given day, or is it just a part of the process?
Well, it's definitely part of the process, but I mean, there definitely is a balance. Like if you can tell, like, kind of if there's a day where like all cylinders are clicking, it's like, hey, as a parent, you can be, and you're, or a coach, you can be like, okay, he's on fire today. Everything's clicking. I'm gonna see how far this can go. I'm gonna see how much more I can push him. But then you you know you have to understand as a parent or a coach, like, hey, you have to understand when to pump the brakes a little bit too, because every day is going to be different. And if my dad can tell, like, hey, I'm having a horrible workout, or like, hey, I just played an awful game, like he needs to kind of ease back a little bit, pump the brakes, realize that I'm completely broken down right now, I need to be built back up. So as a parent, that's when you don't put the pressure on. My dad can't be like, hey, you were a little bitch today. You were soft during this, you were soft during the workout. Like, you're not going to get anywhere. It's like, no, no. Your dad, as a parent or as a coach, you have to acknowledge. My dad's be like, hey, I know how frustrated you are right now. I know you just had a really bad day at the gym. You know, that's when you have to, say, like, hey, this kind of stuff happens. We're going to get you back. We're going to get you, kind of focus on that goal again. It's like, this is a little hiccup. We're going to get you back to that ultimate goal. It's like, this specific day does not define you.
I like what you said there about, the ultimate goal,
Mhm.
right? Because you got to kind of think of it. I kind of think of
There's
it in my
always going to be slip ups. There's always going to be slip ups along the way.
I kind of think of it in my head as like tunnel vision, right?
Mhm.
When you're
And Kodak, they
focusing,
don't want to see me running. Tunnel vision.
so yeah, tunnel vision. If you're focused on that ultimate goal, right, there's going to be highs and lows. There's going to be ups and downs, right?
Absolutely.
You got to stay even keeled. But I like how, the way I look at it in my mind is like, it's just that compounding effort, right? Whether it's a good day, whether it's your best day pushing that sled up the hill, or whether it's just a day where, hey, let's just get through it, right?
Yep.
Like, let's just get through it. It's that compounding effect in life, and especially when you can point that towards a specific goal, that's when you really find magic at the end. When you persevere through all of that, and
It makes you appreciate those difficult days a lot more. And then even like, just like in high school when you're playing in a game, like you have your good games, you have your bad games, you have your good practices and bad practices. Honestly, adversity creates resiliency. And that's what will get you to your goal. You have to be resilient in order to make it to where you want to make it to. And once you hit that goal, once you're, where you want to be, it allows you to appreciate the journey just a whole lot more. It's be like, hey, it allows you to appreciate your worst days. Like fast forwarding many years, I can tell you in college, my first start actually came when I was at Eastern Kentucky. My first start came at guard against Southeast Missouri. I had the worst freaking game of my life. That was the
Your
lowest.
first start
My
was the
first
worst?
ever start, I graded out at a 68. I was immediately taken out of the starting lineup the next week, and I was more of a rotational role going into that game. But then I ended up earning that starting position again, getting back up there, and I never looked back. I started the rest of the games my entire career. But at the end of my career, it was like I got to look back and I appreciate that SEMO game because that was a huge awakening. It's like that was my worst day at Eastern Kentucky. So it's like,
So talk about where you were mentally after that game, because I'd love to hear about that. You just had your worst game. You graded out at 68.
Yep.
Like, because I feel like that's a skill. If you have that moment and you're able to refocus and not beat yourself down too much, right? You can't be too consumed by your performance because it's that process.
So I have a 24-hour rule. It's definitely something that everyone should implement. So, you have a bad game, you think about it for 24 hours. That's it. You put it to bed. You put it to rest. Because I was fucking crushed after that game. Like on the bus ride home, like I felt like I was like kind of like holding back tears. I was even texting like my dad and my friends, be like, I freaking let my teammates down, all that crap. I just had to hold that all in. I had to you know,
Damn.
I kind of had to take it all the next day in the meetings when our coaches were recapping the game. Because it was just a very bad game in our season, just in general as a whole team. Like, but yeah, 24-hour rule, put it to rest. You know, I kind of had the mindset like, okay, like this is a brand new game, brand new season, you know, going into the next week. And then, you know, for high schoolers, like you have a bad workout, bad practice, bad game. Think about it for 24 hours, and then that's it. You put it to rest, move on to the next. Because if you can put it to bed, it probably won't happen again.
Right. And even developing that skill of not carrying that with you, right? And just using it as, you know, remembering what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Using it as
what is my goal?
a refocusing
yes.
kind of mechanism, right?
Yep.
You have that bad game, your first start, you can use that to refocus. So the next time you're in the weight room, what's on your mind?
Just getting
You know
better,
what I mean?
putting that to rest, and then honestly just going balls to the wall. I mean, that's the best way to put it. And then if you have a bad game, I mean, so something that would always get me going is like, okay, like yeah, I had a bad game. You know what? Next week, I would just tell myself I'm just gonna line up and I'm just gonna hit a motherfucker every single play, and that's all that matters.
Back to the basics.
Back to the basics. Right? Hit a motherfucker every play. Back to the basics.
Listen, back to the development camps.
Yep.
Back to square one, technique, you know, effort on every play. So yeah, absolutely. The mental aspect I think is just as important as the physical aspect, in my opinion.
And then kind of going back to like, you know, kind of want to transition now to like, you know, when you're in high school and, you know, when you're kind of that FOMO, you know, it's like, it's a difficult process. I mean, there are, let's talk about like sacrifices that are made.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, you talked about it in the beginning when, you know, you and your dad sat down and made a decision.
Yes.
That you're going to train 6 days a week.
6 days a week.
And you're pushing the sled up the hill every day, right?
Pulling the sled. Pulling the sled every single day.
So,
every single day.
I mean, that sacrifice is right there. And then even the sacrifice of kind of just committing yourself to a goal that's bigger than you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Putting something before yourself, I think, is a sacrifice because, you know, other people, you know, when you're in high school, they're thinking about other things. They're just
thinking about hanging out with their friends, going to parties,
you know, all the different stuff. We've all been to high school, you know. But you kind of holding yourself to that goal is kind of the ultimate sacrifice.
Yes.
Of, you know, I want to be a Division I athlete, and I'm sure there are other people that said the same thing, but they were still indulging in those things. They weren't sticking to that plan as heavily. So, you know, the sacrifice ultimately is what gets you to that end goal.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, there are things like, you know, kind of going back to like parties and stuff like that. And then what's involved in parties, you know, like obviously people smoking weed or like, you know, drinking alcohol in high school. It's like, you know, I made the decision to, you know, to not do any of that when I was in high school. You know, I never went to parties, you know, I never abused drugs and alcohol. And, you know, because I was like, you know, I need to get my body right. Like that's a huge setback, but it's like you get to school and it's like your friends are talking about, oh, this awesome party that they were at, like, oh, all the beers that they pounded, and it's just like it sounds like they're having the time of their lives.
Yeah, so going back to, you know, being in that high school environment, do you ever remember having a time where you had like a slip in focus and you questioned, you know, maybe I should be doing these things with my friends, you know, maybe I should be having this experience because I'm only going to be this age once, right? And kind of questioning, should you put that over your goal of being a Division I athlete? How do you handle that?
It happens all the time. You know, I will say it definitely affected me a lot more when I was younger. I would say like, you know, sophomore, maybe a little bit in the junior year. Like, yeah, you know, I had that FOMO, that fear of missing out. And, you know, I would always ask myself, like, is this even worth it? Like, I'm literally like, you know, I'm missing out on so many things in my life right now. And it's like, I feel like in high school, it kind of felt like, I guess, what's the best term? I was sheltered. It's because I sheltered myself from everyone because I was so focused on this goal. You know, I feel like, you know, a lot of my classmates didn't really even get to know the real me
Right.
because, I was just so committed to this. I was always training, and that's what I would do. I wouldn't do all this extra fun stuff with them, and I mean,
So
really
going,
the biggest way to get back on track is just to trust the process. Remember what you're doing, kind of going back to, what conversations with my dad, on how we're going to get here, and then conversations, with coaches, especially, the guy from that recruiting agency that helped me out, conversations with him, because there are going to be so many dull moments, and, just kind of, understanding, the whole process and like the time it takes to get there. Like in the end, like if you do make it and you missed out on all these things in high school, but you do make it, it's all worth it. It's all worth it.
so you kind of have to lean on the people that have been there.
Yes.
They know what's coming next. And
Yes.
they see that potential in you, and you have to remind yourself and stay close to those people that are kind of feeding
Exactly.
that life into you.
Because there's going to be so many people that'll try to steer you from your path. There's
Right.
going to be so many people that will want to pull you down in this direction, that will want to pull you down in that direction. It happens all the time. There's always going to be distractions. There's always going to be things that will mess up your focus.
Yep. So looking back on that, I mean, how do you feel? Do you feel like you balanced that well, or do you feel like you were maybe too focused on your goal, but you didn't care because you ultimately ended up where you wanted to go? Like how do you kind of view that in your own mind?
So I definitely, when I got older, I definitely had a much better balance. I kind of set the parameters like, hey, I'm going to hang out with my friends, but obviously, I'm going to get my whatever I have to do in the gym. I'm going to do that first, and then make time for my friends. And then, with my friends, we're gonna do kind of this. We're gonna be here and here, and I'm only gonna stay out till this time. Like I would kind of give myself a curfew. So it's like, hey, I'm getting the best of both worlds. Like, hey, I'm still hanging out with friends, but I'm still staying on track, with my training, and then I'm not going crazy. I'm not staying out too late. I was definitely able to find a better balance because early on, like let's say when I was 16, like it would either be like all in the football and like no time with friends, or it would be like hey, I think I told you the other day about this time when I was 16 and I spent like 4 days in a row camping with friends, and this was like a week before the season started, and my focus went away so bad because I wasn't.
This was before sophomore year.
This was right before sophomore camp. My focus went away so bad because I was like, it's like, man, I'm finally having a good time with my friends. I'm camping. We're staying up late. We're doing fun stuff, and it's like, oh, but damn it, I have practice next week. This is bullshit. This is what I'm missing out on. Like, yeah, when I was younger, it was the focus could slip easily. There wasn't a good balance.
Dealing with those teenage emotions.
Yep. Oh yeah. When you're 16, you got a lot of them. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So, kind of flipping the script there. What about the mental aspect of your performance? Let's go back to that with I feel like we kind of so absolutely we made a lot of good points here.
A lot of good points today.
The physical aspect, the mental aspect, it all starts with that spark. I think that's a brilliant way that you're able to describe that. Seeing Stalin Colonnade and learning more about that recruiting process and kind of just the birth of that vision in your mind, and then the commitment that came after it, right? You and your dad
getting your body ready, and then kind of the mindset you have to have. And again, pretty much all we talked about today was, your first couple of years of high school. Like we didn't even touch on what happens much later in the process, which is why, during our next episode, we're going to kind of talk about those later years, like junior, senior year, you've done your development camps, you're finally a starter on your varsity team, you got the right mindset, you have the vision.
Now you got to start putting out quality
film. And then, actually like trying out, which is like, going to prospect camps and, talking the coaches, because there's rules in the NCAA, and, typically coaches aren't really allowed to actually contact you until like the second half of your junior year. Like they're allowed to call you, like, I forget the rules, to be honest. It might be different now, of course. I mean, the rules have changed so much since I've been done, but I mean, they would call you like once a month. They were allowed like one phone call a month. You can call them as many times as you want, but like they were only allowed to call you a certain number of times. But we'll definitely dive so much deeper into that in the next episode. And I'm just so excited to get this out here, man. I'm pumped to be doing this podcast.
Absolutely, we got a lot of good information that we can bring to people, and just kind of helping them understand, the process. Leveraging Tom and what he was able to do at a young age is, it's going to be helpful for a lot of people going down that same road, and people that want to go down that road, but maybe they don't even know how it began, like you. Exactly. And all they need
is that spark.
Is that spark.